So I did a study abroad in Europe, lived in Greece, Italy, and France for about a month, traveling across, getting to see the great parts of Europe. It was a cultural program. I loved it. But one night, our whole group went out to the bar in Venice, and there was 17 of us in that group, and 14 or so were girls. We got into the bar, and then they started talking to a older man, probably in his 40s or 50s, significantly older than we were, and convinced him to start buying them drinks. So next thing you know, I'm being handed drinks, beer, mixed drinks, shots. You can name anything I wanted, you can name it, they were handing it to me. And this is where I had an ethical dilemma to make. What would my decision be? Do I take these drinks when I know the man paying for them has no clue they're going to me? Or do I say no because I know it's wrong? I would argue my decision was unethical because I did decide to take all the drinks that were offered to me, and the man who was paying for them had no clue that I was doing that. I'm going to take and I'm going to explore some of the different ethical theories that we've gone through this semester and then argue through those theories in detail and analyze just how unethical and why my decision was unethical. The first of the ethical theories that I am going to attempt to analyze and then apply to my particular ethical dilemma is going to be deontology. The first thing that comes to mind when thinking of deontology is the moral duties that you are expected to uphold no matter what, regardless of the consequences, regardless of what comes out of the issues. Furthermore, when it comes to deontology, the intention of the act does matter. There are also two key points of deontology that I feel necessary to cover in this particular situation, and that is the categorical imperative and the principle of universality. The categorical imperative is a key point to the ethical theory of deontology and is considered a universal moral law that applies to everyone regardless of the outcomes or the personal gain to be had from the situation. Furthermore, it is the principle or ideal of doing what is right simply because it is right, not because you have a personal gain or benefit to be had from the situation. The principle of universality goes hand in hand with categorical imperative and outlines the idea that an action is only allowed or acceptable if it abides by the idea that the rule or maxim guiding the issue can be morally applied universally to any different sort of issue. When examining my ethical dilemma through the deontological lens, the conclusion can be made that my decision was unethical. When examining specifics, you first look at the lying that was done to the man at the bar in order to get the drinks. By lying to him, that showed that there was bad intentions. I had solely negative intentions. I took from this man unknowingly to him and did so in a way that violates the principle of universality. Because in this particular situation, if you were to generalize it to any situation, the rule, the standard should be not to deceive or lie to somebody, which I did. I also violated the categorical imperative because I did not adhere to the universal principles. I broke the law. I lied to get what I wanted. My intentions were wrong. The second theory that I'm going to analyze and then apply to my ethical dilemma is going to be utilitarianism. The fundamental principle behind utilitarianism is going to be the maximization of pleasure and the minimization of pain. Some key points of utilitarianism is the idea that right and wrong is based solely on the result, that the motivation behind the act is irrelevant, and that each individual's pain and pleasure is equal. It's also important to understand that when it comes to utilitarianism, the whole idea is whether you are maximizing your pleasure, happiness, and benefit. This is what you call the hedonistic calculus, and the idea behind the hedonistic calculus is that you identify and list all of the pain and the pleasures, and then you make the decision based upon the most amount of pleasure and the least amount of pain for all of those involved. That is why, when examining my ethical dilemma through the lens of utilitarianism, I would still make the argument that my decision was unethical. Right, because yes, you have the short-term pleasure of all of us getting free alcohol, but you have the long-term pain of the man having to owe tons and tons of money for something he had no clue that he was doing. Additionally, you have the guilt that stays on all of our consciences for doing that to the man. So that is why I would still make the argument that it was unethical through the lens of the utilitarianist. The next ethical theory that I'm going to analyze is going to be virtue ethics. And virtue ethics are considered to be sort of the middle ground between deontology and utilitarianism, in the sense that it's not just based solely on your action, and it's not just based solely on your consequences. Virtue ethics makes the argument that situations are a good test of someone's character. Virtue ethics allow for character growth and development. By making an ethical decision when presented with a dilemma, you're able to walk away with a more refined ethical character, right? All about growth. And a key principle behind virtue ethics is the idea of eudaimonia, which is considered a state of like happiness or flourishing or well-being. Then with virtue ethics, you also have the idea of the golden mean, which argues that the morally right decision is somewhere in between the virtues of excess and deficiency. Now, when you take virtue ethics and you apply it to my ethical dilemma, the same argument can be made that my decision was unethical, right? You take practical wisdom and you use it to reach the golden mean and apply it, and you walk away in my situation with the decision that what I did was unethical, right? I still, when I had the chance to speak up to the man and say, hey, right, I am taking money from you in the form of alcoholic drinks without your permission, but I didn't do that. So when I had this choice or this dilemma presented in front of me, I had the choice to make, and I still decided to not tell the man what me and the rest of the people in my study abroad group are doing. And that's why, through the lens of virtue ethics, I would still consider it to be an unethical decision that was made. Now, when it comes to ethical egoism, the whole argument behind the theory is that the only ethical duty is to promote one's own well-being. And basically what that means is that you should always be looking out for your own self-interest, and that is the most ethical way to go about decision-making when presented with dilemmas. Ethical egoism still makes the argument that altruism exists, which is the idea that you truly can disassociate from yourself and do things for the good of other people without the idea of how you benefit on your mind while making those decisions. Now, ethical egoism, as I said earlier, it acknowledges the existence of altruism, but it says that you should not follow altruism, period. And I would make the argument that when applying ethical egoism to my particular ethical dilemma, you could make the conclusion that my decision to take the free alcohol was ethical, but I still believe, even through the eyes of an ethical egoism, that it was unethical. And I say that because it wasn't the best decision that would benefit me the most. Because if we're following to the principle that what you give to others, you will receive back in the future, then by taking from somebody unknowingly, I am manifesting that per se back into my own future. So I would still make the unethical argument here only because I lied and deceived somebody knowingly to their face. Now, the fifth and final ethical theory that I'm going to explain and then apply to my ethical dilemma is the ethics of care. And the ethics of care differs significantly from all of the other ethics that I've covered before this one previously, as it emphasizes the aspect of care and relationships with others when making ethical decisions. Now, there are three key points to understand and analyze when it comes to ethics of care, and they are attentiveness, responsiveness, and responsibility. And in order to be attentive, there has to be recognition of the relationships and the needs of others with whom we interact. Additionally, when it comes to responsibility, there has to be a recognition of obligation in relationships. And finally, when it comes to responsiveness, it has to be the action that is taken in order to address the needs of whom we are in relationships with. Now, when applying the ethics of care, there are key questions that have to be asked. And they are, first, identifying all the relationships that are involved, and then identifying the impact that will have the most harm, but also be attentive, responsive, and show responsibility. And this is why I still believe that through this fifth lens of ethics of care, my decision was unethical. Because there was not attentiveness to others. We acted on our own self-interest, and that caused harm to the man, but also caused guilt for all of us, which is very unethical. Lying to that man, no matter what way you look at it, is unethical. What we did was unethical. It was the wrong decision to be made in the moment. And when you look at all five of these ethics and these theories that we've covered, and I apply key points as I have throughout the rest of this video essay, the big conclusion to be drawn here is that the decision that I made was unethical.
Go away and don't break my bones. Go fuck yourself.